Welcome to the Do Good on Purpose podcast, where you can listen to leaders discussing solutions to the most pressing challenges in our world, and where you can also support them by donating through the show's Giving Circle, through the link in the show notes. Think of a giving circle as giving together, combining what each of us can contribute so that we give bigger, we give better, and we make a much greater impact than any one of us could ever make alone. If you've streamed K-drama, sung along to K-pop, or reached for a Korean beauty product lately, you're part of a global phenomenon that has put Korea on the map in ways few could have predicted a generation ago. But here's the thing. Korea has always been on the map, long before BTS and Squid Game and glass skin routines captured the world's attention. The relationship between the United States and Korea was already one of the most consequential partnerships in the world. It spans nearly 70 years of shared history, profound security ties, deep trade and investment relationships, extraordinary cultural exchange, and people-to-people connection that has only grown stronger with each passing generation. K-pop and K-drama opened a door, but what's behind that door? Diplomacy, a security alliance, economic partnership, the Korean American community, and the complex realities of the Korean Peninsula. It's a story most of us have only begun to understand. This episode is also deeply personal for me. Earlier in my career, I had the privilege of serving as a U.S. diplomat, working on U.S. Korea relations, both North and South, including being part of free trade agreement negotiations with South Korea and humanitarian aid to North Korea. That experience gave me a profound appreciation for just how important the Korean Peninsula is to the U.S., to the world, and how much the quiet, consistent work of building understanding, trust, and connection between our nations truly matters. My guest today is Dr. Abraham Kim, President and CEO of the Korea Society, and the first Korean American to lead the organization in its nearly 70-year history. Abraham brings more than 2 decades of experience in foreign policy, leadership development, and cross-cultural bridge building, having led the Council of Korean Americans, the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center, and the Korea Economic Institute of America before arriving at the Korea Society. What stands out the most about Abraham is his belief that genuine understanding between nations is built not just in government halls or diplomatic channels, but in classrooms, cultural exchanges, business partnerships, and the quiet, consistent work of civil society organizations like the Korea Society. On today's episode of the Do Good on Purpose podcast, we explore what lies beneath the cultural movement, what the U.S. Korea relationship really means for diplomacy, security, business, and the Korean American community, and why investing in that relationship matters more than ever. Dr. Abraham Kim joins us now. Dr. Abraham Kim, thank you so much for being on the Do Good on Purpose podcast. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you here with me today. Korea is such an important country in the world. Korea is on the map in exciting ways, and it also holds a really, really special place in my heart. I'm of Korean descent. So are you. And I have a background in working for the Korea Society. And so I'm so excited to have you here today. You're the CEO and president of the Korea Society. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Dorothy.
I'm really excited to talk to you about what the Korea Society does in this moment. You know, I worked at the Korea Society about 20 years ago. The Korea Society was formed and launched almost 70 years ago. There's a lot that's happened over the past 20 years, over the past 70 years. And so can you talk to me a little bit about what the Korea Society's mission is today and why it's so important today as it was 20 years ago, as it was 50 years ago?
Well, the Korea Society was originally founded 70 years ago, as you mentioned, by a gentleman by the name of General James Van Fleet. And he was an important general, 4-star general that was a part of the Korean War. And when he returned back from the Korean War, he felt that there was an important need for Americans to continue to not only learn about what had happened on the Korean Peninsula, that most people had no idea where Korea was at the time, but also to continue to have this friendship between the peoples of Korea and the United States. And so the purpose of the Korea Society, its original mission was to help Americans better understand and be informed about Korea and continue that friendship and partnership. And so that mission, central mission, has not changed over the last 70 years, and it continues to be an important part of the Korea Society and its purpose here in the United States. And so today, of course, Korea is a different place than it was many decades ago. It is a vibrant, developed country with leading technologies, with culture being an important part of its external outreach to the world, as well as its economic dynamism and power, right? And then we all see it and feel it every day in our consumption and so forth. So what is the Korea Society's role in that is that any kind of relationship, any kind of alliance needs continuous building of creating of understanding and educating both sides, both in Korea and the United States, about the the growing relationship, the importance of this relationship, and how the alliance is maturing over that time. And so the Korea Society's purpose today is to educate the current and new generation about this relationship. We are an American organization. Again, our original principle was to share, and it continues to be, to share about that to a broader American audience. We do that in Korea as well, and constantly serve as an educational source and a resource to Koreans, but also connecting leaders between Americans and Korean leaders, both in government and in business, as well as civil society, and being a liaison between all of these different communities to ensure that, again, friendships continue to grow and those partnerships continue to strengthen over time.
Thanks for that overview. I read in the Chosun Ilbo that when you were younger and people asked about your heritage and you told them you're Korean, of Korean descent, they would say North Korean or South Korean, right? And I got that a lot too growing up. And all of that to say that, there's so much more depth to our relationship, the US's relationship with Korea. There's just so much happening in Korea right now that's so dynamic, right? People now ask me, what are the latest K beauty trends? What K beauty products should we be using? What K-pop music should I be listening to? What K-drama should I watch? There's just so much happening in Korea that I think people are paying attention to because of sort of the cultural explosion, really. Talk to me a little bit about what it takes to really build genuine understanding between two nations with that sort of new cultural focus in mind now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for two countries, two nations with rich histories on both sides and rich culture and society, I think it's important to look at each country holistically, right? Both from a political, but also economic, business, and cultural, as you referenced. And so the complexity of learning about each other, and ultimately it's about learning about people, right? And people are very complex with its societies and cultures and traditions and values and so forth. And so I think it's important that, both sides learn all the different aspects, the human aspects, and how do we develop those relationships over time. And so, yes, there is the security challenges on the Korean Peninsula, the tensions between North and South Korea. That's an important part of the country, but that's not the only part of the country, right? And so now all this cultural boom that you've referenced, as well as, again, as I talked about, the technology, the business, the economics, also food and film and all these different things. I think Americans are getting more and more exposed on what makes Koreans Koreans. And that's exciting. And the Korea Society plays an important role to help facilitate that, whether it's at the highest levels of leadership in business or government or civil society, all the way down to the classrooms for students, college students. And so it's just, there's so much richness and so much history together as well between the United States and Korea, and constantly teaching that, constantly encouraging people to explore that. is a part of what we do, and that's the exciting aspects of this relationship.
Yeah, that's so well said. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the human element that you're talking about that you raised. So the Korea Society is a nonpartisan nonprofit, right? And you mentioned that you're operating sort of at the intersection of business, foreign policy, economics, culture, all of these things at the same time. And what role do you think an organization like the Korea Society plays in international relations and fostering a deeper understanding in a way that governments maybe just can't do on their own? Like how do you complement and sort of step in where governments can't?
Sure. Yeah. So I think governments, their role obviously is, they cover important aspects of the relation, whether it's diplomatic, whether it's security, whether it's trade, economics. These are very official uh, aspects of the relationship, things that are very important in creating institutions around these relationships. But we know that there are formal aspects of relationships and informal aspects of relationships. And the informal aspects are oftentimes where civil society plays an important role because governments are everything has to be documented, everything is official, and everything is very public. There are things that where the civil society, the informal parts of this relation, we can play where certain conversations and learnings need to be in private or honest conversations needs to be had. And so I think where we play an important role is not only in the engaging each other and learning more in depth, and as well as learning more um, in private ways where we can learn before they become public. But also, I think we play an educational too, where we are constantly teaching, informing, being a resource to both sides of leadership. Again, both in government or business or civil society, and we are constantly also informing the general public, right, about these relationships and what is important. And so I think being a democracy, for example, one of the important aspects of a healthy democracy is having an informed constituent, right? Informed voters and informed citizens who are also playing an important role in establishing relationships between two countries. And so civil society, we play this whole deepening that relationship and all the informal long-term building and learning between two communities. And so for us, being here in the New York City area, that's our immediate audience that we continue to inform. And as you know, there's a lot of business activity as well as civil society activities here. And it's a global city where there's a lot of exchange and interchange going on here, and we are able to play an important role there. We play a role in Washington D.C. as well, and across the country. And so we're taking the message of the importance of this relationship from coast to coast, from Atlanta to L.A. to Seattle and Chicago and so forth. And so we're able to have a farther reach. We can reach farther down into areas of education and culture and arts and so forth, where oftentimes governments just don't have the resources or the reach, or just they're focused so much on the top level formal aspects of the relationship that they just don't have the resources. And that's where we play a role and complement, as you say, in this effort to strengthen the relationship over time.
That's great. Thank you for that. We're going to get into your vision and, what you're planning in terms of really kind of getting into these more local communities across the US and bringing Korea there and enhancing the relationship there as well. But I first want to talk about you because you are the first Korean American president in the Korea Society's nearly 70-year history. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. And congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
What does it mean to you personally, and what do you hope it signals for the broader Korean American community here in the US?
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to be the first Korean American ethnic Korean in this role during the 70-year history of the Korea Society. I think, quite frankly, a lot of people in the community were surprised that to hear that I was. I am the first Korean American, but I think what this signifies is a certain level of maturity within the Korean American community. I'm a second generation Korean American, meaning I was born here in the United States and was educated here and so forth. And I think more and more Korean Americans in my generation are taking on leadership roles, whether it's in civil society like this, or in business, or government, or education, or any number of fields. And I think it's important that Korean Americans do take leadership, not just of course, in mainstream areas, but also in areas of U.S. Korea relations. And I have been in foreign policy for most of my career, and really coming to Korea society is really an apex opportunity where it's being a public face for the U.S. Korea relation and being Korean American. And I think being Korean American, obviously, my parents are from Korea and they immigrated here. And so there is I guess, a heartfelt pride as well as, happiness, I guess, in terms of being able to serve in this kind of role. But also, I think more and more Korean Americans needs to be in this space of U.S. Korea, because we are a bridge, we are bicultural, and we have an understanding on both sides of this relationship because we have been exposed to both cultures, both heritages, and both societies. And so being able to communicate effectively, but also being able to create understanding between these two communities that sometimes, there are misunderstandings, and we are able to help facilitate those relationships, but also create greater understanding. So I think that's, that's all very significant. And also, but one thing I do mention, even though I am the first Korean American in this role of the Korea Society, the U.S. Korea relationship is far larger and far broader than just Korean American community. We are Korean American community is an important part and should take a leadership role, but you don't necessarily have to be ethnic Korean to be involved in the U.S. Korea relationship. It is something far broader, and I think more and more people from all walks of life should be involved and actively engage and also really enjoy the richness of this relationship. So.
Thank you for that. And, you've got such an impressive background. Columbia University, Harvard, you were at the Eurasia Group, the Korean Economic Institute of America, the Mansfield Center, the Council of Korean Americans. It's huge what you've done. And now you're leading the Korea Society at this moment. What has that journey professionally taught you about the relationship between identity, purpose, and leadership?
Well, first of all, I never planned my life this way, so it just happened. I think looking back, post-hoc is often looking back. It's often 2020 visions. Like, of course, I had figured it out this way, but in fact, I think the most important part for me was that life is not linear, and you can never plan for it, but always be open for opportunities and be open to um, uh, things that, doors that are opening to you. And so I think for me, that's really the story of my life, is just jumping into these opportunities that were presented. And for me, I guess there's a common theme here where I was involved with a lot of leadership development work and constantly looking to how to help leaders, how to support leaders, how to help leaders become more effective in what they do, both from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. And also later in life, really understand the importance of mental health of leaders as well. And so a lot of the work that I eventually became a part of has been helping these leaders, whether it's in government or business and civil society, and also investing in part of that's really investing in people, the importance of people, and leaders are people too. And through that engagement, through investing in others, through mentoring, being mentored as well myself, and supporting those above as well as those that are coming behind the pipeline of leaders. It just opened up opportunities for me to continue in that work. And so all the organizations that I've been involved in my roles in the past have had this flavor of leadership development and of others, and also investing in others. And those opened up opportunities and doors for me to continue that work in other fields. And now here at the Korea Society, helping not only a general audience, again, understanding about the U.S. Korea relations, Korea, and so forth, but also investing in the next generation of leaders who will be shaping the U.S. Korea alliance and relationship. And so that's what I'm really excited about. And that's what I continue to thrive and really enjoy doing, but hope to contribute in that space moving forward as well. So
Thank you for sharing that because I think it's so important when people get to know a nonprofit that they understand who the leader is and how they got to where they are and what they believe in, because they're not only going to get behind what the nonprofit is doing, but they should really get behind the leader too. And so thank you for sharing your journey and what's important to you in building the next generation of leaders. So why don't we talk about that a little bit? Can you talk to us about your vision? You're there now for a few months. You've got this vision. You're at this really sort of pivotal moment in U.S. Korea relations and sort of the cultural explosion that's happening there. How do you see taking forward the Korea Society in this moment?
well, I think where I see the Korea Society's future is actually in the space of leadership development and building a community around the U.S. Korea alliance and the relationship in all of its aspects, not just the public policy, diplomatic space, or the business, but also in arts and culture, in education, in all these different areas. And because Korea Society is so multidimensional and interdisciplinary in its approach, we are able to do that and bringing all these different communities together. And so my vision is, as actually as I mentioned in prior part of our interview, is that the U.S. Korea alliance is changing, and it's changing in dramatic ways. Where, like we shared before, just even I would say 10, 15 years ago, when you ask people about Korea, there was very, very not a lot of knowledge behind what Korea, where Korea is or what it's about and so forth. But that's changed dramatically as we already talked about things like K-pop and K-drama to food to Samsung, LG technologies in our homes, in our pockets with our phones to semiconductors and AI in the future and so forth. So really Korea is become so many different parts of aspects of our daily lives as well as the future of this country and the globe. And so this whole idea of educating and creating awareness around the US Korea or even Korea is actually in many parts of the world is already pretty saturated. And in fact, there's a lot of other organizations jumping into the Korea space, whether it's education or arts and culture or policy and so forth. In DC, there's so many think tanks now that are covering Korea and the security situation or business economics, a lot of trade and a lot of investments coming in from Korea. So the question is for an organization like the Korea Society that's been around for 70 years, which has been covering all these different areas, what do we do in an increasingly crowded space, and what is our unique value proposition? As business consultants would ask you, right? What is your unique value proposition? And I think for us, because of our long history, because of our access to top leaders, and because of our understanding across multiple disciplines, I think our next phase of this, as I mentioned before, is really about community building and how do we develop leaders around this? Because I think a lot of the work we've been doing is just pushing out information, but not this engagement with the community, working with the community, as well as developing learning together with the community. And so, and the alliance, as we've mentioned before, matures, changes over time. And so we need continues to have leaders in this space. And so the Korea Society, I think, as I wouldn't say a new role, but a kind of a new purpose aside from just public education is how do we develop leaders? How do we become that bridge of creating deepening that education, but also deepening relationships and understanding? As you know, and as everyone knows, just reading for newspaper headlines, our whole globe is going through a transition right now, especially our foreign policy relationships as the United States with other countries. And through that process, there continuously needs to be communication understanding. And so what we're doing on that front is One is creating more private conversations where leaders can have honest conversations about how we can work through problems and issues together and challenges, but also how do we work together to take advantage of new opportunities, such as, we're going through this technological revolution right now with artificial intelligence and blockchains and many different areas, and these are areas that U.S. Korea leaders can work together, and both countries are on the cutting edge. And how can we work together to continue to develop these spaces and create mutual benefits to both countries and also trade? And we're also important partners in developing these areas. So we as Korea society is, how do we create the platform so these top leadership conversations can happen? The other interesting development that's been happening as well is, as some of your listeners might know, Korea committed to $350 billion of investment into the United States to various industries, from shipbuilding to semiconductors to energy development and so forth. And a lot of these investments from Korea are going into areas of the United States that historically have not had a lot of experience with, for example, in places like southeast parts of the United States, such as Georgia, Tennessee, Louisiana, South Carolina, and so forth, as well as places like Texas and Indiana and so forth. Not the traditional places where you do find a lot of Korean, like LA or New York or so forth. And so, with these increasing presence of Korean companies and Korean leaders and Korean American communities growing in these areas like the Southeast and Texas and so forth, there needs to be some bridge building and also educating of the community, but also educating of Korean leaders and communities that are going to these spaces. Because quite frankly, I mean, America is not a monolithic country either, right? There are Southern cultures and Texan cultures and Massachusetts culture and New York culture and so forth. And so if Koreans working together with Americans in these spaces and investing a lot of resources and building companies and building communities together, there needs to be understanding. And so we are moving into these spaces as well at the Korea Society in terms of how do we better inform local communities about Korea? How do we invest in schools and teach them about U.S. Korea, provide resources in these spaces and do talks, but also how to inform local leaders and business leaders that need to now engage with Korean companies and also, there are differences in corporate cultures as well. And as in Korea, there's an expression called "빨리 빨리," which is fast, fast, and Koreans like to do things so fast, and sometimes it's a little bit can come across a little bit abrasive as well. I think in some communities, but at the same time, how do we help Korean managers and executives and engineers and workers who are going into these places to understand about the local culture and the people there and in fact, Korean culture and many of these community cultures in the South, for example, have many similarities in terms of valuing community, valuing family, valuing barbecue as an important part. I think are all an important role that the Korea society can play as these economic areas are developing, as political relationships are growing, and we can add tremendous value in these spaces. So those are some of the areas that we are exploring, in addition to our traditional work of educating the general public about arts and culture and whatever the latest current events are, but also just being more targeted and focused on these areas where Korea is appearing, perhaps for the first time in the United States, as an economic force, but also people are moving there and now living side by side with Americans in these spaces.
This is so exciting. When you think about how the Korea Society started, as you talked about at the beginning of the conversation, and creating ties at sort of the highest level, country to country, to now kind of moving into more kind of local spaces to build that understanding and those ties. So you're talking about leadership to leadership understanding, but then people to people understanding, as you were saying, which I think is so important, especially as you said, these companies are in many cases going into these communities maybe for the first time. And there's so much more to the relationship and to Korea beyond just K-pop and K-dramas, and that's a window into it. But how do you go a step further and create sort of the environment and the understanding so that those relationships can really thrive? And at the same time, to your point around next gen leadership for the people in those communities who are going to work for those companies, for those Korean companies that are being invested in these local communities, how to prepare them to enter and work alongside Koreans who are coming into these communities. I think it's a smart move and, exciting, really exciting. So I'm really excited to see how this all unfolds. So, what I want to ask you next is you've talked a lot about what's happening between the US and South Korea, right? And what you're doing in terms of your programming and your vision. Can you talk a little bit about North Korea and your thoughts on that and how the Korea Society plays a role, if at all, in that space?
North Korea obviously has been and continues to be a challenge on the national security front for U.S. Korea alliance as well as the region. We have 28,500 American men and women in the military in uniform still based in Korea, and they've been there to help continue to ensure the security of the peninsula as well as be a part of the important security alliance and commitment to the region as well. And so North Korea developing its nuclear weapons as well as its conventional threat to the region is very much alive today as it has been over the last 70 plus years. So, but nevertheless, that does not mean that we should not continue to learn about what's going on in North Korea, as well as helping to work with, again, civil society, international civil society, as well as inform the general public about and also encourage policy conversations about how to de-escalate the tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And so the Korea Society plays an important role in that and facilitating some of these conversations, whether it's at the official level or unofficial level among academics or business leaders, or even just common citizens who are concerned about not only the national security threats, but there are human rights concerns, there are economic development concerns, there are any number of issues. I think part of my career, I was part of an organization called the Eurasia Group, which is a political risk firm, as well as I've been working in the think tank world. And so one of the things that we've always said about North Korea is that it has the blessing of geography, we always say. What that means is that because it's in such a sensitive area of the world where you have literally with the U.S. forces in Korea, you have LinkedIn, the largest, the most powerful country in the world, and connected. You are engaging the second largest economy of China. You have Japan, you have South Korea, and it's growing. And North Korea is and then you have Russia as well, just to the north. So you have all the major powers globally, and you sit right in the middle of that neighborhood, right? And having all of those countries engaged and concerned about the condition within your country, as well as the security threat that North Korea presents, you have the world constantly tied in. And so, and I think in understanding how that does leave the global environment, the global geopolitical situation, very vulnerable to what's going on to North Korea. And I think educating all the various citizens in the region, as well as the United States, about why this issue is important, why we need to continue to invest our time and attention, is an important part of what we do, because it is a part of what is foundational to the U.S. Korea Security Alliance, as well as the future of all of these countries in that region. And so our role has been, again, educating, facilitating conversations, as I mentioned before, training leaders who can bring new ideas and helping to de-escalate the situation there. But also, how can we also find out new ways to help North Korean people who are ultimately the ones that are suffering under a very authoritarian, totalitarian system. And so our role has been constantly to educate, to facilitate, and also to develop leaders. So that's been our role. over the last 70 years, and we continue to play that role into the future.
Thank you for sharing that. I think not a lot of people realize that we do have troops there, and we've had troops there since the end of the Korean War. Um, and it's a significant partnership on that front, right? The alliance. And so thanks for sharing that and pointing that out. And also talking a little bit about how you as an organization are continuing to stay true to your mission and facilitate the flow of information around, just educating the broader public and facilitating a deeper understanding of what's happening in the region as it relates to North Korea and de escalating in some cases, right? Through track two dialogue, things of that nature. So, having worked in North Korea, having worked there through USAID as a food for peace officer and having been there, and spent significant time in the region, it's so important to continue to share and to continue to just keep information flowing as much as we can because it is and continues to be such a delicate situation. So thank you for sharing how the Korea Society plays a role in that. So what gives you hope in this moment? You did talk about sort of the state of the world and, at the same time there's a lot of exciting things happening in South Korea and you're in this role and what gives you hope?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, what gives me hope is actually because I do get to work with a lot of young people, I think, and the energy and the excitement and the new thinking they bring to the table. As I'm working in the kind of the leadership development and the mentorship space, especially looking into who will be carrying the baton, right, so to speak, in the next generation of this work. I think that's very exciting. I think also what is hopeful as well is that there is a lot of change occurring, right, and there is change in not only the technology front, but also changes going on in Korea and in the United States. And some of it's very positive, encouraging. Some of it's not so good at times. But I think the opportunity for to move forward and everything that we assumed in the past is actually being up for question simply because of things like I guess I'm still learning about artificial intelligence, but what does that bring? How that's going to change our society? I think it is creating a lot of nervousness, but also when change and these things happen, there could be opportunities, right? New opportunities that have not been presented to ourselves in the past, or even just the boom in the cultural transformation that's occurring in Korea, for example, as well, and how that's reaching the far reaches of the globe as well, and what kinds of effects that might have, both positive and I guess there are challenging aspects, but and so the world is constantly churning and changing, and so I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist, but I guess I'm inherently optimistic, but also so I think those are things that keep me hopeful for the future, and seeing the energy in our young people as well. So those are some things that are keeping me hopeful, and also that there's new thinking and there's new ways of trying to solve problems are constantly in the mix, right, in the discourse that we're all engaged in here. So I'm looking ahead.
That's great. So next gen, I keep hearing next gen and leadership, and that's certainly it's definitely a part of your vision and I'm really excited to see how that manifests. I have been to your new office and the expanded space and the art gallery and just the feel of the whole place is so inviting and so open and just the energy there is palpable. So I'm really excited for you as you take on this new chapter at TKS. And I'll say one last thing. The Korean classes that you're offering, when I was at the Korea Society, and I took a couple classes here and there, they were not K-pop, K-drama inspired. So for people who are really looking to learn Korean today and travel there, and I think it's a really fun way to package a class. So I think that's exciting. I can see how you're really kind of building in that next gen lens into all aspects of your programming. So congratulations on that. So one last question. We're coming to the end, and that is, if people feel inspired to support the Korea Society through the Do Good on Purpose Giving Circle, what would their donations support?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to your donors. I think, I think, as we've talked about throughout this interview, I think it is about the next generation. How do we invest in young leaders or emerging leaders who will become the influencers, the change makers, the people who will be bringing new and creative ideas into areas of whether it's diplomacy or civil society engagement or business and economics. And so we're spending quite a bit of resources and time in investing in college students and high school students and young professionals and providing these opportunities for them and also so a lot of the work and a lot of the investments that are going in that we are spending and also from our community is in these spaces of education and beyond just the New York City area. Now we're, as I mentioned before, we are going into areas that have not traditionally had deep history with Korea. So how do we take Korean culture and education and learnings to places like Tennessee, South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, and so forth? And I think these kinds of what we call public diplomacy or engagement at the local level are absolutely important. Not only because it's good for just promoting kind of learnings and understanding, but also we want to help Americans become global citizens as well, right? And the world is impacting all areas of the country, and things like Korean investment in culture are coming into these areas, and to understand that and to create bridges, and also how do we invite these communities to Korea as well, and actually, some of the programs that we do are exchange programs. We bring Americans to Korea as well as a part of our general programming. And so I think contributions from your community would go toward that, toward how do we expand that understanding, expand those educational opportunities, expand the minds of our young people, our young leaders who will also be shaping our national relationships. And so that's what we hope that your listeners would be not only excited about, but inspired by, and also would love to invest in as well. So
Dr. Abraham Kim, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for your appointment at the Korea Society and this vision that you've outlined and everything that you're looking to do with the next generation of leaders and positioning them to really take on the reins to advance U.S. Korea relations and understanding it at the highest levels and locally as well across the United States. So thank you so much for being with me.
thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode on the Do Good on Purpose podcast. And if today's conversation inspired you, please consider supporting the work through the Do Good on Purpose Giving Circle, which is linked in the show notes. And if you really enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Share it with someone who believes in building a better world, because change rarely happens by accident. It happens when people decide to do good on purpose.